Everyone. So I'm Byron Kutsis. I'm the technical sales advisor for Fronius in Southern Africa. So the company Fronius, the beginning of Fronius started in Bettenbach in 1945 by Gunther Fronius, who originally was discovered that the car batteries were flat after the World War. So what he developed was a battery charging solution. From there we then developed into around the world. So you've got different subsidiaries and agencies. So you've got 3 agents, for example, in Africa itself, and then we've got different subsidiaries, such as in the US, the UK, for example. And just some small facts and figures. So we've got a few of our export ratio of 98%, as well as we've got 60 countries with sales partners. So our sales partners is referring to Krannich, for example, or Inomatic or IPC, for example. We've got 60 different partners around the world, and as well as 37 international subsidiaries itself. So again, we have full offices and dedicated units around the world itself. We have got about 6,000 employees in Fronius itself, and that's split over our 3 divisions. So we've got our Perfect Charge, Perfect Welding, and our solar divisions. And we have roughly a turnover of about €1 million a year over the 3 divisions. So again, mentioning about our business units, we've got our Perfect Weld, SolarEnergy, and Perfect Charging. So originally we started out with the Perfect Charging, with the charging of the car batteries. And Gunther Fronius then realized you get a nice arc with the batteries itself on the DC side, and that's when he then developed the welding side of the business itself. From the welding, obviously from AC to DC, from ratio from changing over, he then developed the inverter company on that side. So today we'll be talking about the SolarEnergy business unit. So all Fronius inverters are designed and manufactured in Austria itself. So our R&D department, for example, is in Tallinn, which is about 15 minutes from Satellite, which is where the factory is located in Austria. So next I'll be covering is the inverter overview on the hybrid side. So Fronius's hybrid inverters that are available. So we've got what's called our Gen 24 series inverters. So it's available in the single phase, so 3 kilowatt to 6 kilowatt at the moment. We are expanding up to 8.2 and 10 kilowatt going into next year. You've got 2 MPPT inputs on the inverter, and as well as a direct battery connection in the inverter itself. You also has a PV point, so this is when you are utilizing the hybrid capability of the inverter without a battery available. So what happens is you can pull 3 kilowatts directly through the unit itself into a small outlet, and then you can do single phase 3 kilowatt availability for 4 hours, for example, without having a battery. The same can be utilized on the Simon side, which is our 3-phase side. So again, this is smaller units from 3 all the way to 10. Again, you've got 2 MPPT inputs, and as well as 3-phase direct power output on the inverter itself. As well as you can utilize the PV point, but it would only be over one single phase that 3 kilowatts is then available to the system. So again, about the maximum power and the full backup on the Fronius Gen 24. So overall supply, so you can do on the entire household itself. So you're limited to 4 hours of backup generation power, as well as on the electric load, so either being single phase or 3-phase, all depending on what is available. And as well as the maximum changeover time. So it is 60 seconds, but it has been brought down to 13 seconds on the changeover side from battery operation to normal operation. And then PV points, so this is where we're utilizing the hybrid capability without the battery itself, and we're putting the generation through the panels through the inverter to a single outlet, for example. So again, in case of emergency power outage, 3 kilowatt is available over one single phase. So even if it's the unit's a 3-phase system, it's only supplied over one single phase. Again, it's no easy installation, so no additional components are needed. So it's built in on each unit itself. So you just have separate cable running out of the unit to an outlet, and you can then have utilized itself. So with the Gen 24, you will be needing a smart meter for the system. So whether this being a single phase or 3-phase, you will need a smart meter in the system. From here, you can only utilize BYD batteries, so the HVS or HVM series. is the only compatible battery inverter pairing that is available at the moment, sadly. So next is the grid tie operation. So this is when you would typically AC couple with a Victron later on if you're wanting to do battery backup. So Fronius offers the Primo, which is the single phase grid tie unit, which is 3 kilowatts at 8.2, single phase with 2 MPPTs. Then we've got what's referred to as our SIMO small. So there's a 3-phase unit, smaller from 3 kilowatts to 8.2. Again, it's S&M, so it's single or multi-string input, for example. So it's single or 2 MPPTs. And as well as this SIMO big. So this is a larger 3-phase grid tie. So it's 10 kilowatt all the way to 20 kilowatt. And it's got 2 MPPT inputs on the inverter. On the commercial side, if you wanted to do a grid tie to then AC couple, you can still recommend is the SIMO big, so again 10 to 20 kilowatts, and as well as utilizing the eco inverters. So this is 25 and 27, 3-phase units, but also it is weight and cost optimized, so it doesn't have a filtration board. It uses inboard fuses on the unit itself, so it is a little bit cost optimized, and as well as you've only got a single MPPT input on the eco 27. So this is due to the orientation of in Europe, where they design it at east-west, where they utilize a single MPPT and then gain that change in that. And then lastly is the Taro series, which is our largest CNI-based inverter. Again, available 50 kilowatt and 100 kilowatt 3-phase, as well as has single MPPT or 3 MPPT depending on what unit you are ordering. So on the Taro side, we do have different configurations that are designed for it. So this is our robust commercial inverter itself. So you've got the Taro Eco, P and D. So this is referring to a single MPPT input on the inverter, and the P and the D is referring to pre-combined or direct input. So it can either have a pre-combined cables coming in, or have MC4 connection points under the inverter for your string inputs. And then on the standard, so the Fronius Taro P&D, so this is referring to the 3 MPPT input grid tie inverter, but it is only available in the power class of 50 kilowatts. And again, your DC input volts do change depending on what unit you are ordering. So if it's the Eco, it's the 580 to 1000 volt DC input, whereas the standard is 200 to 1000. So with Fronius, we promote the easy installation and service. So we utilize a simple snap-in process for all our inverters from the Gen 24 and snap inverters, but not the Taro itself. So what happens is the back plate is simply there to be mounted on site. You will then put your connections into the inverter and then simply snap the whole physical unit into place. Again, when it comes to servicing the unit, you can remove the whole inverter itself to then be sent for repairs, or you can do repairs on site itself. So again, what Fronius we promote is active cooling, not passive cooling on our inverters. So again, this leads to higher yield due to the lifespan of the inverter itself, and as well as the unit being IP rated for 65, so it can withstand rain, dust, it can be exposed to the elements. So what Fronius we also promote is our design flexibility. So this is our dynamic peak manager, for example. So this is when you're allowed to have 3 modules all the way up to 24 modules. So obviously it depends on your input voltage range. So on the single phase, for example, you can have 60 volt all the way up to 600, and on the 3-phase it's 80 all the way up to 800 or 1000 depending on the unit itself. As well as it allows you to do oversizing of 150%. So you can oversize the unit quite a bit in that sense. So with Fronius we promote is our system monitoring site, which is also known as our Solar Web and Solar Start. So Solar Start is our commissioning start guide. So what happens is if you are commissioning a Fronius inverter on site, we do recommend that you have the Solar Start commissioning app, which is available. So this will allow you to commission all Fronius products, so whether it be a Taro to a Gen 24 or a snap inverter, all you will do is utilize the Solar Start app itself for that. For SolarWeb, so this is our monitoring platform, so which is available on the web browser as well as on your phone, so iOS and Android, for example, to do full monitoring and visualization, as well as to generate reports if need be for the client. And lastly is the Fronius SOS app. So this is our troubleshooting app, which we recommend all installers do have available. So if, for example, you're on site and you have an error 306 or 307, for example, you'll simply enter the inverter serial number and what state code it is producing, and it will then give you steps on how to rectify that issue. So it'll ask you, is the DC isolator on, for example, is all the AC connection points and DC connection points tight, check the fuses, for example. It will run down steps on how to rectify that issue. So again, it's mentioning our commissioning, which is our Solar Start app itself. So again, it's available on the app stores, and it has 3 simple steps for commissioning our newer units. So if it's a Gen 24 Taro, it will then present you with 3 options. So simply you do a network connection, the product settings itself, and then lastly the SolarWeb. And that's your commissioning done on the Fronius. This is a typical demonstration of how our SolarWeb or monitoring platform is displayed. So from here you can then go to solarweb.com or by downloading the SolarWeb app itself. Again, you can do full analysis, energy balance, and as well as any service messages and remote updates for the system. Next is Fronius's warranty options. So Fronius has adjusted our warranty at the moment. So if the unit is 12.5 kilowatts and below, by simply doing the registration process, you get 10 years in total warranty on the unit. So originally out the box it was 2 years for the unit itself, and by simply doing the registration, which is free, you get an additional 3 years, so it's 5 years in total. And then if it is needed that an additional warranty is needed past that, you could contact us and we would then be a simple bill for material cost for the unit. But that being said, again, if it's 12.5 and below, it's now extended to 10 years in total, free. Again, making use of our Solar SOS app. So again, it's for troubleshooting as well as for fast commissioning. You can also do an overview of all cases. So if you are ordering spare parts or a spare inverter that needs to be replaced, you can then view your order status with Fronius itself using our Solar SOS app. You can also get automatic notifications of when tech support has communicated with you. So they'll typically communicate through the app itself, which will then output to your email address, for example. But any updates that are occurring on that case will be notified also through the app itself. And as well as managing multiple accounts with one single account. So if you are the main account holder, you can have separate accounts that you are managing itself. So you're not limited to only having one single person that you can offer SOS for example. So your main account will then be controlling each individual installation that you have done, for example. So again, it's different variations of our SolarWeb platform that we have for monitoring. So originally you had the live and the archive data, but with SolarWeb Premium, which is free for all of us in Africa, it will bill you at €0 on your card when you exit the SolarWeb, and this will allow you to do monitoring as well as your simulation data. So if you've got a client on site where they have a Gen 24 installed and they haven't done a battery, you can then do a simulation profile for if they want to do a battery to the system. It'll pull the data directly from SolarWeb that it's gathered, so your consumption and PV production data, and it will tell you how efficient it would be to do the battery on the system itself. So it'll tell you if you're 90% efficient, for example, or 60% efficient, for example. So with all Fronius inverters, if you are doing a grid tie installation, we do recommend that you utilize our Fronius smart meter. So again, it's a bi-directional meter. So you've got the single phase, which is the 100 amp, and as well as the 63 3 amp. 3-phase, which is a voltage pass-through meter, but if you are utilizing a CT meter, then it's the 5 kA meter for commercial size installations. As well as you can do full monitoring on the meter itself, as well as having separate meters for the system. So if you have one main grid meter for the feeding point, and let's say you have 3 different tenants that you want to monitor individually to see what their consumption loads is, you can have 3 separate smart meters on the system, which will be fully displayed in SolarWeb itself. So again, we mentioned that it is essential for every system if you are utilizing the Gen 4. As well as with the smart meter, if you have a separate smart meter, you can then trigger separate relays to open when there is a PV surplus, for example, that is available. So if you say the pool pump must trigger at 12 o'clock midday till 2 o'clock, it'll make sure there's a PV surplus available for that to then allow that relay to be triggered. Next is our Watt Pilot variant. So this is for our EV charging solutions that we have available. So we've got our Watt Pilot Go, which is 11J and 22. So this is the portable unit that can be carted in the car itself and then be connected at the office to then redo your charging. So it's again a power class of 11 kilowatt and 22 kilowatt. Again, this is AC charging, as well as the Watt Pilot Home. So this is recommended for physical home installations where the unit's not needed to be transported, for example. And again, this is only available as an 11 kilowatt at the moment. We are bringing out a new Watt Pilot, Watt Pilot 2, which does allow 22 kilowatts home charging.
But is that going to be 3-phase?
3-phase. So it can switch between single phase and 3-phase itself. So depending on what amperage you are drawing, it'll be single phase, and then if the amperage does increase, the unit will automatically switch to 3-phase. Again, with the Watt Pilot, you have full control over your charging needs. So you have our eco mode, for example, where you will charge at the cheapest rate. So it'll utilize full sun generation in order to charge an EV vehicle. Or if you had a variable tariffs, for example, then you'd utilize that. As well as on the Watt Pilot app itself, we are constantly updating with newer cars that are coming out with the relevant data that's needed for it. So we charge on a kilowatt per hour basis, so it'll transfer it back into a kilometer basis that's then needed, for example. So you'll tell the app that you need to do 66 kilometers tomorrow. It'll make sure that that equivalent kilowatt hour is available in the battery itself. So with Fronius, we also promote, because when you're designing and implementing, is to use our solar configurator and as well as our solar creator tools. So what this is useful with the unit itself and as well as what modules you are using, for example. So from here, it'll tell you what is the optimal string design, as well as how many modules to have per string in the unit itself. So with Fronius, we promote the quality and service. So our products for 24 hours of sun, for example. So we started out in 1995 with the Sunrise unit and all the way up to 2021 with the Fronius Taro that was launched. So all our units are tested above the norm. So we are constantly trying to improve the units with all testings that are required. So IEC standards, for example, as well as NRS. So lastly, I want to talk about is our Fronius system partnership, or what we refer to as our FSP. So what is the FSP? So what we offer, so you get an information advantage being an FSP itself, as well as discounted rates from our distribution partners, as well as the chance to do board replacements yourself on site. So you don't have to take the unit off, for example, to send it in to be repaired. You can simply order the spare parts and then do repairs on site itself. To your benefits, again, you can do on-site board replacements, as well as visualization on our online portal. So for example, if a customer says they want an installation done in Krugersdorp, for example, and your company is based there, they will enter that they want an installation in Krugersdorp. Your company would appear as recommended installers. So you effectively become a registered Fronius installer. You also get the priority hotline. So you have got a South African number that you can dial for technical support. You can use Skype to dial the number, and what happens is that number will direct you to Fronius Tech Support in Austria itself. So if you are stuck on site, for example, at 8 o'clock at night, it is 24/7. There will be someone there to answer and to help to rectify whatever issue you are having on site. With the FSP, we optimized service process. So again, as the FSP, you will then contact Fronius Tech Support either via SOS or through the hotline itself. They will then do the exchange process, so it's either ordering of spare parts or the inverter itself, and then from there you can then reinstall the faulty component. So you've got the exchange components as well as the exchange of the inverter itself, and then the repair cost, the estimate for it. So that depends. So you, for example, as an FSP, you are then approved to do any repairs on any inverter itself. So for other countries and other market regions, you do get a kickback from Fronius when you are doing repairs, but not for the Southern African market. So again, with the Fronius SOS tool, so it's available on your browser and as well as on your phone. So what's handy is on the browser itself, you can do password resets. So if you are stuck on site and you've been sent to someone's pre-existing site and they've forgotten the service password, for example, with SOS you can then reset that password itself. So you'll simply lose the same login credentials that you would use on your SolarWeb. So the two systems are linked in that sense. From there, again, you can enter the serial number and as well as input your error code that is available, as well as you're viewing your open cases, for example, that are occurring. So if you are on site and you notice something is very similar to a case that you originally opened, you can then backdate and see exactly what was the steps that were taken to rectify it. Again, for ordering of your exchange components, you'll enter the serial number, what the stake code was that has now allowed you to do the exchange components. You'll then enter a fault description. So if it's an AC failure, for example, AC voltage, and then you will simply then reset it. SolarWeb Business has been put on hold for the time being, but it was aimed at for systems that have got greater than 50 accounts on it, for example. So if you're a single EPC that has 50 installations or 100 installations, SolarWeb Business was designed in order to help you monitor and do full remote updates by triggering one click, for example. So you'll say all Sunware 20s to update, and you could then trigger that update to then go through. So as the FSP, what's the next steps? So is to participate in our face-to-face trainings. So we have level 1 to level 3 open days, and as well as doing 5 installations per year or 5 registrations on our SolarWeb platform for the warranties, as well as 4 participations in our bi-weekly webinars that are available on a quarterly basis, as well as to update your business contact information once a year, so to let us know who is part of the company, who has left the company, and who is our main contact for the company itself, as well as your market feedback. So once a year we will make an effort to come and visit you as an FSP to have a face-to-face meeting with regards to Fronius itself, as well as for the Fronius trainings. So this is the trainings that are available online and also on our face-to-face basis at our facilities. So we do Gen 24 commissioning and training, as well as storage solutions. So if you're doing a BYD in the system itself or utilizing the PV point, as well as our heating and mobile solutions. So if you're doing an installation where they're using an own pilot or an EV charger, we can then demonstrate on the training on how to do it itself on the site. As well as the practical days, so this is where we will strip the inverter out, for example, and show you how to do the board replacements on the unit itself. As well as from Fronius as an FSP, you can order our marketing materials, as well as Fronius branded t-shirts and jackets that are available to be purchased. You can also order dummy units. So if you have a part in your your office that you have a showroom, for example, you can order dummy units to be displayed. So if the client wants to physically see what the unit would look like, for example, you can order dummy units. So again, if you have completed your 5 systems, you'll then need to follow the link, and we'll simply contact you via email asking if you are wanting to be Fronius system partner. So again, for any technical questions or trainings, as well as for Sales International, and also after sales, and also to contact myself if you have any technical support that is required.
And you're through PV run power
Correct.
without a battery.
Correct.
For your essential loads, or
Well, basically for your non-essential ones. So if you have, let's say, you want to charge your laptop, for example, or you're running a server with your internet connection, for example, at the office, then you can utilize that output in that sense.
so
there
long
is-
as the grid's available, you can use.
So if
So if the grid goes down,
you can utilize it in that sense without the battery itself.
for your non-essential loads.
Your non-essential loads. So for loads that can only last for 4 hours, for example. So that's why it's only utilized as an emergency backup power point, and not full backup power.
So those two AC outputs, one,
Correct. Correct.
so one being dedicated to your battery loads,
Correct.
which it wouldn't be able to do in the load shed.
So it can. So if for example you have got a battery in the system and your PV point, you can utilize both in order to achieve what you want to achieve.
So basically it's able to do PV output, whether it's straight or not, whether it's battery or not.
Again, it's limited to 3 kilowatts for 4 hours.
So how does it work? I mean, does it have a battery inside it?
So what happens is it disconnects completely from the grid itself, the grid source. So under the relays, we'll have separate relays that need to be triggered in order to disconnect. And what happens is the inverter is not then fully complying with NRS because it hasn't got a grid reference. So from there you're free to do whatever generation you want to in that sense. So that's why we can utilize for a certain, for 4 hours. So that's why we can pull the generation itself through the inverter from the modules. So again, if it's 3 kilowatts, we can then have that AC output. Even on the 3-phase systems, it's only on the single phase that will output.
And then your EV charger, you said it's already both single and 3-phase.
So it does change over. So it obviously depends on what current has been drawn.
Yeah.
So it'll be either under single phase, and the minute that current goes above and 3-phase is available, it'll change over.
Okay. And then so like it's hooked up to a 3-phase socket outlet, and then
Correct.
and then the various vehicles have their adapters that connect to your charger.
Correct. So what you'll do is on the Watt Pilot app,
Yeah.
you'll then program it to say, okay, I have a BMW i3, for example. So from that, it will then know what kilowatt hour battery pack is available to charge, and what is the recommended amperage to charge the vehicle.
Okay. But the cord between your charger and the vehicle.
You can order it from Fronius itself. So it's normally type 2 charging cable.
Oh,
It's
okay.
industry standard.
Yeah. They all kind of take the same cable.
Yeah. And again, it's AC charging, so it's not a super fast Tesla charger, for example,
Yeah. But you can be utilizing EV
to charge the EV.
if it's available.
Yes.
Funny enough, in George the other day, we had a lot of customers that did EV charging.
What one?
Right?
EV charging.
But BMW and
But there's a contract with credit cards.
So it must be quite expensive to be charging EVs at home if you don't have it hooked up to the solar system.
Yeah.
So I guess people want to find ways of charging the vehicle for free because it's costing them a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean at the moment, now when you're purchasing your EV car, they normally recommend a charger with the vehicle itself. So the minute you've purchased, they'll either sell you a SMA. Yeah, SMA comes with Mercedes-Benz, for example. So they do offer some sort of charging solution for you, but not solar cell.
Yeah, so what we've seen is that people are using three-phase socket outlets with like whatever charger came with their vehicle. So this guy's got an Audi charger plugged into a three-phase socket outlet. He'll remove that, he'll bring his other vehicle and he'll put in a charger for that vehicle. So, but his requirement is to get that point backed up by the PV power so that he can charge his vehicles for free.
Yeah.
Because it's costing him like 30 grand a month on electricity.
Correct. So that's why, like with the watt pilot, if we had variable tariffs, like they do in Europe, for example, where you can then say, okay, we're charging at 10 cents per watt, for example. You could then input that data. But sadly, we don't have variable tariffs, for example. Or if you have an external data manager box for the site. So next is telling you that the app is available on Android and iOS if you want to download for SolarWeb. So first we'll start with is the technical wizard. Again, to make sure that your DC isolator is on the off position. Because if it is on the on position at the moment, the unit will start now producing power. So if you have not told the system that there's a smart meter or feeding limitation is on the site, you can then up pushing against the grid itself. Again, smart meters at the moment, they do trip the minute you are pushing back against. So it's just to make sure that that DC isolator is off. So we'll start with the ignition wizard.
Drive Fronius Easterlies.
Somebody got it.
It's one of those. So first we'll start off on the general tab. So here's where we'll then input the system name itself, and as well as our feeding tariffs. Now sadly you can't leave the feeding tariff at 0. It has to be 0.1, for example, until ESCOM blesses us with the amount that we are allowed. You then have to put 0.1 for the time. Then your grid supply tariff, so what is being calculated at the site itself by the client. Next is the system time. So now it will be gathering data if it was connected to an inverter on what time and date you have set on the unit itself. So next you can set the time automatically based on the time zone and what the system, your current system itself is displaying as the time. So here we can then select Africa, for example, and we are then free to select where the installation is done. So next we'll go forward. And next is the inverter tab. So if there was inverters connected to the system itself, so on the box itself, if we had inverters coupled to it with RJ45s, they would then be displayed under the inverter tab. So from here we would see, for example, a Primo 5, for example, as visible as 01, so that's our master. 02 is our slave, 04 onwards, for example, is our slave units. From there we can then give it a device name, so we can say it as master Primo, for example, and master slave, for example. You can give it separate names on the system. Lastly, what we need to add is our PV watt peak. So this is the kilowatt peak on the DC side that has been on the inverter itself. So if, for example, we're doing an installation where we all have the same, so we're using an Eco 27, and we've oversized it to 28 kilowatts, for example. We can then set it for all Eco 27s have been oversized to 28 kilowatt, for example. So you don't have to go individually and now separately input that data. So once we have set that data, forward. Now it's asking for it. So now this is where you would set your service password for the unit. Next is the I/O mapping. So this is where you have your input and outputs that you want to trigger separately. So if you had load management, so this is when you are triggering a separate relay to open with PV surplus that's available. You can then define what pins it is on the I/O block. So there's our 4S485 connection block. We can then assign which pins it is assigned to, as well as our I/O controller itself. We can define which pins we are utilizing. So next is the meter tab. So if we had a Fronius smart meter in the system, we would then need to assign if there is a meter in the system or not. From here we then need to set the location of the meter. So if it's a feeding point or a normal consumption meter, we need to define that value itself. If you have multiple smart meters in the system, the Modbus address of 01 will always be your feeding point meter. 02 to 04 are your consumption meters. So that way the inverter is not confused by any other data that's receiving from a smart meter. So it always relies on the feeding meter being the primary meter. Next is your dynamic power reduction. So this is if we want to do zero feeding on the system itself. If it's a grid tie operation, we'll then say we want to limit the entire system, and then we'll input the total DC power of the system itself. So for example, we've got multiple inverters that we're running at 25 kilowatt available on the system itself. We can then say we want to maximize the grid feeding power. So what I always say is to use a negative percentage, as that way you are always drawing from the grid itself and you're never riding at that absolute zero wattage that you are pulling from the grid itself. So if you are slightly pushing back into the grid, some of the meters are sensitive again. It all depends. So that's why I normally recommend is doing a negative value, so that way you're always drawing from the grid and never riding dangerously. And then lastly is to reduce inverter power to zero if the meter's connection has been lost. So that means if the meter's RS485 is being pulled out, for example, the system will literally idle itself down to 0 watts production until that meter communication has been enabled again. Now we have completed the technical wizard. So if we had DC connected, our smart meters connected, and we've got AC, we can now effectively turn the inverter on to start producing power. So now we know we save with our feeding limitation, for example, as well as assigning how the inverter is controlled. From there we'll then do the solar web wizard. So now is when we will then assign the inverter on what internet connection it's connected to, for example, and what profile it's assigned to on the solar web itself. So again, we'll pull data across from the technical wizard across to the solar web wizard, but again, just to make sure that the data is correct, that has been pulled across. So we'll pull over the general and inverter tabs. Inverters. So next, this is just ensuring that Fronius is not responsible for doing any updates to the system itself. You are responsible for it. So next is our connection mode that we want to achieve. So we can either do via WLAN or via LAN connection itself. We can then set a dynamic or a static IP for the system, as well as for your WLAN connections. So for example, you will then find the client-based internet connection, and then from there you can connect. If you are doing a Victron installation, or a Victron AC coupled installation with the Fronius, the two need to be communicating on the same network connection. So if Victron's on network A, Fronius also needs to be on network A, for example. Also recommend is if you are doing an AC coupled installation is to use a LAN connection between the inverter. Do not rely on WLAN when it is AC coupled with Victron, because the Wi-Fi card is not stable enough to keep that connection stable. Rather run a cable connection in, and that way you know you are safe. Next is to send data to Fronius SolarWeb. If this is off, the system basically does not have an internet connection at all. It doesn't exist. So again, is to make sure that this is enabled, and as well as your login during nighttime hours. So what happens is the system will appear offline on SolarWeb if it's during nighttime hours, and then only when the system has got production again, it will then appear online, for example. So you don't know if there is actually an error with the system, or if it's just during nighttime error, for example. So for the time being, we'll see. Next will be the admin password. I don't have the admin password, so I need to reset them. And then lastly is your SolarWeb tab to be finished. So this is when it will then ask you who exactly is the owner of the system, and it will send an email address, an email to them, giving them permission to then view the system in SolarWeb itself. Do you want me to touch on Modbus now, or? Yeah.
Can you just go back to the network? Yes.
Network setup.
So when there's no internet access at all, like there's a site that's maybe quite remote, is that where you go to LAN? Is that where you set your IP address?
Correct.
Of the inverter, where you can like modify it?
So what happens is if you've got an open port,
Yeah.
and you have got a static IP assigned, then you can remotely log into the data manager.
Okay.
But again, only if you've got open port, then it is possible. And then Fronius doesn't take responsibility for any remote access.
Yes, no, I understand that.
So next would be if you are doing your AC coupled with Victron, and what settings need to be adjusted. So here, for example, we use further settings. So what we need to adjust is our Modbus settings, and as well as our DNO editor. So from here we have data export, so it's either TCP or RTU. So what's important to make note of is the inverter control via Modbus. It's the most important one that needs to be selected. And as well as checking that our controlling priorities have been set, as controlling Modbus is at the top, and then dynamic power, and then our I/O control. So we can adjust these values depending on the site, for example, and we can do that. So if once you have set your Modbus settings, make sure you do click on the check mark. Okay, so we don't have a meter, so it won't allow us. Go to DNO. Okay, so we'll go to DNO and make sure that our controlling priorities are set as controlled by Modbus at the top. With the I/O control, this is also where you can use a ripple signal coming in from a deep sea controller genset, for example. So if the ripple controllers receive that the inverter is running at 30% because the generator is running, we can then enable those settings. But again, only if need be on the site itself. Again, it's not a full genset protection in a sense. You do run the risk of pushing against the generator itself. No limit because we are controlled via the Victron itself. We just need to make sure that that's selected. And then we need to make sure that our priorities are set. So normally it would be dynamic power as the top priority. So we need to set that the controlling is top, followed by dynamic power if we had a smart meter still in the system. And then lastly is our IO control. So once we're happy, again, check mark. And then the lastly is top check mark to make sure all settings are applied to the system. So again, that's if you are doing Victron coupled and as well as your any genset integration or PLC, external PLC that's controlling the system itself. Exactly the same settings would apply. Depends obviously if it's TCP Modbus or if it's RTU, it will vary depending on what controller is being utilized. But that's how you would commission the snapping recipes. Again, the video, we have got how-to videos that are available that run through the exact commissioning process. So if you are stuck, you can go to our how-to videos, which will then demonstrate. Cool. Any questions? I'm going to leave it running.
Yeah.